we interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
Yeah, so I guess really sitting in the college classroom post-military separation, pre getting into the fire service, that nice little niche lost area we found ourselves in was really what kind of birthed what is now, Brigands Co. and the community-driven aspect behind it. I think that was a huge epiphany for me at the time, was taking for granted a little bit, even your normal friends that I was with in Ranger Battalion, and the way that we even spoke to each other on a daily basis. And then finding yourself in a classroom where apparently 24 was like the old guy in the classroom, weirdly enough. And I'm sitting front and center with my pen and my notepad, and I'm, ready to learn some stuff in college, I guess. And the people to my right and left are obviously very much different. They're younger. They're seemingly more disrespectful. They're on their phones. They won't stop talking. And it really was like, I need to find more people that kind of understand my background, whether that's other veteran, nonprofits and stuff like that in the area, that I can talk to people, meet people. And, at the time we had been selling t-shirts at Ranger Battalion for a little while, as Brigands Co. at the time. And we kind of started using our social media presence to talk a little bit more about the community aspect behind it. And that's one thing we're pushing nonstop now. So
good deal. So when you when you were sitting in a classroom, what was the first day, first class, first feeling like to sit in a room like that after transitioning out? Now I know what you said, but like, when you sat down, did it sink in like, oh, okay, this is going to be my future for a few years? Or
yeah, honestly, yeah, it was a little bit different. So luckily I knew, so my brother Connor had been at Ranger Battalion with me and was kind of guinea pigging everything, as a year older big brother does. Fortunately for me, he was taking the brunt of like every pipeline and being like, yo, get your ruck on your back. This is hard, or whatever. He's kind of helping me out. So we were both at Ranger Battalion together. He got out a year before I did. Went to EMT school. Went to started getting his associate's degree. So he was kind of saying, dude, you should really go to EMT school. Class is weird when you get out of Ranger Battalion. We're not used to sitting down at PowerPoints and all that as Ranger. Obviously, like we're flipping rocks and doing stuff outside, right? Range days and all. So he was like, it's very different, but EMT is obviously a great transition. Half of it's review. You're going to smoke all the trauma sections and all that stuff. You're going to learn a little bit about the more of the medical side, and yeah, you'll be good to go. It shouldn't be too bad. Again, I was out for I may have even been on terminal leave still, if not fresh out of the military. And I wind up at Daytona State College at the EMT program, day one lecture. And again, I am, of course, absolutely over-prepared, right? I'm acting like it's the first day, meeting my team leader or something at first bat. And I showed up, people are showing up late, people are lost, they don't have their IDs, they don't even bring a pencil, that whole thing. Yeah. And very quickly I realized, like, okay, I'm going to be all right. But it was very hard for me to turn off, even though, it was like such a huge buildup for me. Like everything else was, I'm a classic overthinker, overplanner. But I showed up, and after I met my first instructor, Tony Cowan, shout out Lieutenant Cowan, Port Orange Fire. He's the man. He was an Army vet himself. And I feel like he kind of took me under his wing a little bit too. He even knew, like, hey, who's this guy, like straight up ready, like a stick in my butt the whole time, I'm sure I looked like, but very over prepared for that first day. And then as that class went on, I feel like turned into frustration with peers, because then like a lot of things that I felt should have been taken more seriously aren't always taken as seriously. And you get into the monotony of practicing skills for hours on end and everybody just kind of screwing around. And, it was a little slow, but it wasn't super challenging. I would say it was a good transition for me coming out of the military as far as test taking goes,
Yeah. Now, what gave you, besides the military, what gave you the attitude prior to all this that starting a clothing company and some of your other endeavors we'll get into, like what gave you that mindset of this is even possible? You know what I mean? Like, what was your background even prior to the military? And we're going to get into all that, but what was it like growing up?
Yeah. Funny, man. So originally from Fort Worth, Texas, I feel like growing up in Fort Worth, you kind of had every lifestyle at an arm's length. There was obviously the Fort Worth Stockyards is, the cowboys everywhere. You can step in cow patties, pretty easily any turn you go. And, or at the same time, there was Dallas, like Deep Ellum was on Elm Street and everything was a great hardcore scene back in the early 2000s. And they kind of started that whole metalcore thing, a lot of coming out of punk and stuff like that. And downtown Fort Worth, the same thing. We had a couple clubs that really pushed hardcore early. So seeing all of these different kind of avenues, we were 4 hours from the beach. So every once in a while we'd get out there and kind of see what that was about. And growing up was just, I think really my parents it was a very strict household, but we didn't, as long as the grades were kept up and as long as our manners were held to a high standard, we didn't hear no very often as far as what sports you wanted to play. I wanted, they put us in, me and my brother both, in piano and guitar and drum lessons when we were like, I started piano lessons when I was 4 years old and was forced to take piano lessons for 10 years. And and that just kind of instilled a different kind of discipline at a very young age. Like I didn't really know any better. And, but again, as much as they forced that, they let me choose to take drum lessons on top of it. So as long as I did piano, they'd let me play drums. So they always had if you work for it, you'll get it in the end and be rewarded kind of thing. And they let us listen to the music that we wanted to within reason, right? Like they would maybe give us the explicit Blink-182 album or something in like 2004, but little stuff like that, man. It was a very much be your own person kind of household. And what we naturally got into as, me and my brother, again, super close, very, it was very athletic and a rambunctious household with two boys in the house. So they let us go. My dad, it was a very much take it outside and put your boxing gloves on if you're going to beat the crap out of each other. And, mom would watch from the kitchen, the kitchen sink while she was in cooking dinner and make sure no one got too hurt. And so it was very much a do whatever you're, a dreamer mentality, I would say. My dad was a career fireman as well. He retired at a DFW airport fire rescue. And I think finding the music scene was what really set the red carpet out for everything else, strictly because it taught you to screw whatever like the mainstream was and to do something different. And that's where it all started. That's my opinion on it, because none of my like close, maybe a few of my close friends had parents that were really like, sorry guys, I have to go to piano this Friday. I have piano lessons every Friday. Like, dude, that not super cool for me to say like my whole childhood, you know what I mean? But it was again rewarded with something else. And then when me and my brother started playing music together, him as the guitarist and singer, I was the drummer. It was nonstop practice for us. We lived together, right? We very quickly started playing. We were playing like instrumental gigs at coffee shops in middle school.
Okay.
So we were like 7th and 8th grade playing like very random, almost playing like Jimi Hendrix, like we would play the layman's version of like Fire by Jimi Hendrix with no lyrics. And like people in the coffee shop would just be like, oh, wait, I know this song, you know, and just two like middle school kids. But, you know, we were like on the music theory side, we were actually pretty decent. And, you know, we had a long background in it, even starting so young. But it taught us to just kind of be our own person and walk your own walk, you know. And that carried on into high school as we would, you know, became more athletic as we were growing up. We got into, you know, football and wrestling and stuff like that in high school and all. And it was always a draw for me. I was on the wrestling team in high school, but I was also on the drum line. So I always had that. Well, I'm athletic and I'll take you to the ground, but I'm also kind of a band nerd and I like hanging out with those guys too because they crack me up. And it's a whole different kind of friend group over there, you know. So it was weird. It was very blurred lines for us growing up the whole time. Continued into the Army, which is where, you know, we really leaned into the not so sought after term brigands and, you know, kind of doing things your own way and changing what the status quo of a label can be, you know. And doesn't that sound like punk music? Doesn't that sound like, you know, F authority and, you know, do your own thing and walk your own walk? Like it kind of all sounds the same to me, man. If you ask me, it's music that started the whole thing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. When I was a kid and listening to punk and hardcore, and even like, you know, everybody wanted to put things in categories and subcategories, and it was kind of like, you know, you bark off with a little sick of it all lyrics, like, you know, like live by no labels, you know, like no labels, no lies, like stop trying to put me in a category and just dig music. So same thing for me. It was, I saw a lot of bands just doing what they enjoyed. And 30 years later now or whatever, these bands are touring and still playing shows, man.
Yeah.
And like, especially in the hardcore scene. And I've said this a few times on like whatever Instagram posts or other podcasts I'm a guest on. It's like, if you want to see what the fountain of youth is, it's not all this crap you inject in your body or all this stuff. It's do something you love and an agnostic front, sick of it all. Like these bands are perfect examples of, you know, people who have been doing something they love for 30 years and people still support them and they're healthy, they're happy. I mean, you talk to them at shows and they're laughing and joking, and it's like, I don't know how, and that's why I love finding people like you and who tapped into that at a young age. We all did, but we were all across the country. We had no clue the other person existed. Right. But it kind of like connects us in that same attitude of I you know, I'm drawn to whatever, a very conformist institution like the military. You were drawn to it, I was drawn to it. But even when I was in the Army, I was still seeing things through this hardcore mind's eye of
right.
Okay,
yeah, you don't lose
telling
that.
me, yeah, it's like you're telling me this is how to do it, but my brain also says, what if we try it this way? Can I say that yet? Not as a private, I can't, but as a team leader, I can, you know, or later in life, whatever you're doing. And if it's running a company or whatever, like, hey guys, like I see that all these other shirt companies or clothing companies seem to be doing this. And one of the things that I hate about the stereotypes about the military is that probably 25 years ago or whatever, a few companies made shirts that were, you know, whatever, military oriented, and they were horrible. I mean, I can remember never wanting to wear any kind of shirt that had anything to do with the Army. They were always so bad. The designs were bad. They were cheesy as, you know, I was like, just, like, why can't someone make a really cool design? And then also, this is the thing too, and your company does a great job of doing designs and creating an atmosphere that like brings people in. It actually doesn't exclude them. it doesn't say, "Oh, you weren't a Ranger, so F off," or you
the Brigands Co Army is always recruiting.
Right? Yeah. Like I always wonder too, how fragile is someone's ego that they have to bash other MOSs or job specialties or other branches or even just other people. I never understood that.
It's a weird thing that I would like to think that we're definitely getting away from, at least steadily. But dude, I couldn't agree more, man. First of all, like you said about, all of these tried and true bands and groups that are still doing it. Like, again, tried and true, man. It doesn't go out of style. Doing what you love never goes out of style. And in my opinion, in the Brigands Co way, it's like a black t-shirt, man. It'll never go out of style. So, but it's so true. Like you can't kill that fire, if it's legitimate like that. So, again, that's, I think why I see a lot, especially with the social media stuff. I see a lot of people that have a similar mentality or do want, they want to have that community and maybe start something themselves, but it does take a lot year after year. I mean, we printed our first Brigands Co t-shirts in 2015, and started selling them to the DCO 175 guys. And, we've been doing it ever since, and we have found new meaning, and we have found these other stepping stones that we can push off of and find new motivation. But the discipline's always been there because the love and the passion and the purpose-driven lifestyle behind it has always been there. And we feel it now. It's easy to stay. I feel like at some point we've broken through a glass ceiling, because now I see it. We do these fire events. We just walked 22 miles 3 days ago for veteran and first responder suicide awareness, and seeing the Brigands Co support out there, the other t-shirts, other people from other fire departments and stuff was super cool. So now again, it's like your passion, my personal passion, is now personified by the community. And that is like, all right, we've really got something here. And now we're cooking with Crisco, as they say.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned doing instrumental stuff in a coffee shop. Did y'all ever take it to another level, like where you were?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So that's kind of the crux of our whole childhood, to be honest. Like, sure, wrestling, sports, all that good stuff, football, of course, and growing up in Texas and all, and pretty normal high school as far as sports and drumline goes for me. What I would say the most abnormal thing about our childhood was, one, the support from our parents to do this, but the amount of shows that we played up until we left for the Army, until my brother left for the Army. We had either a 2 or a 3-piece member band that we had played shows, I mean, every weekend in high school. Okay. And then in the summer, we actually had a booking agent at one point. I think the last 2 years we were in high school, and it was, basically the summer was about 2 to 3 shows a week, varying from, all sorts of stuff. At some points we were playing at the, the marathon that runs in downtown Fort Worth, and like the Cowtown 5K or whatever they call it. And we had like a stage set up, and all the runners were running by. And so we could kind of have a playlist like on loop. We had like a 20-minute set that we would just loop for 4 hours or something like that. And we would play and say yes to every event. I mean, roller rinks for free food at the end of the night. And then our hometown shows were really like the Door in Dallas, which was on Elm Street and Deep Ellum, and the Door Fort Worth, Fat Daddy's Sound Shack, the Palladium Ballroom in Dallas. Like, we started getting these, a lot bigger venues, because it was a weird, almost like, of course, we got all of the innuendos like, oh, they're like the Jonas Brothers, but they play punk music. We were young, like high school kids. Right? So very much we were playing the fast, blast beat style. I mean, we're covering Bad Religion and No Effect songs. We opened with Linoleum half the time just because we just love the real fast, throw it in your face, let's get this thing moving kind of style. And again, covering, every Operation Ivy song and stuff. It was just, that was our childhood. And again, I think that what made our whole upbringing so different was that never stopped. Even once me and my brother found each other back at Ranger Battalion, he had a barracks room above me, and we got right back to playing music. So I had an electric drum set in the barracks room. You had to like dive over his Marshall half stack, or it was like a Hughes and Kettner half stack, and he'd like dive over his half stack just to get to his bed. And it was awesome, man. But we kept playing shows in Savannah. We were playing the Jinx and the Wormhole and the bomb shelter, like house shows. And yeah, it very much continued, man. So it never left us. That's for sure.
Did anybody sing, or did y'all just stick with?
No, my brother ended up, he developed a voice, like really after middle school. I think once he hit puberty and we were in high school, it was, he never said would never claim to be a great singer, but you know how punk music goes. A little rasp, you can get away with it. Little rasp and adrenaline.
Yeah, I'll say actually, you don't have to be a good singer, but it's funny when you do hear a band and you're like, hang on a second, like they're punk, but
there you go.
That cat can actually sing, and there is a rhythm, and
right. There's more than just angst. That's awesome.
Yeah, that was the funny thing, because I'm a little bit older than you, but when I got into it was like the late 80s. I was a little bitty kid, but everything got so fast and like ramped up. And so all these bands that had started out kind of playing more of like that traditional kind of punk, and then it was like, who can play faster. And then you kind of, now people label it like, oh, that was the American hardcore scene. But like you and me, we may look at it and go, well, hardcore is more like, these band types of things. Sure. But when it got going like so fast, that's where, the energy was. And then you see those bands come out of that, I don't know, a couple years later. And by the really late 80s, early 90s, everybody's slowing it back down.
Yeah, you're half stepping everything.
Yeah.
And then you're just monster walking. Yeah, exactly. You're like, wow, it's funny how that changes, man, where it's like it meets that balloon burst, and then it just drops to what's the complete opposite thing we can be doing now.
Yeah. And then you get like, now you've got these bands that are absolutely incredible, like Terror out of LA, and they're playing these shows, and just the energy is nuts. And then when you see older people and younger people at the shows, it's like the elders are talking to the younger.
Yeah, man. Right? It's awesome. I love that. I'll never forget my first Terror show. Yeah. LA hardcore, baby. Yeah. Those guys are awesome. They're the truth.
And so for you mentioned Operation Ivy. Did that get you into like other more kind of ska driven bands, or?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like it was probably, I had, man. So all of these bands really were introduced to me by my good friend, Brenton Carney. He's actually one of the guitarists for a band called The Unlikely Candidates. And he really just was burning CDs for me from LimeWire and just writing in very terrible handwriting what these bands were. And I didn't even know the song names. I didn't know. Some of them were like, oh, that's the entire Operation Ivy album, but there's 3 Dropkick Murphys songs at the end of it. And I would like, I never knew what that band was for years and years, or something very weird. And Jawbreaker, he would burn me, and, all this different stuff. And that, I feel like it was Suicide Machines, Wire, Operation Ivy, and the Descendants. I think all in one shot. He was like, listen to these, feed your head. And, he was, I feel like he grew up a little bit more of a latchkey kid than me, because I was like always hiding those from my parents. Those were like the bad ones. For whatever reason. But those were the ones that's when I put those headphones in and was just, this is music. Like this is what it hit me and my brother both on a different level. And that's when we started figuring out what we wanted to play. And then we started writing our songs to be like that. You know?
Yeah, it's hard to explain to a lot of people who haven't experienced it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny even now because of, you know, internet capabilities and different platforms, like where you had to, or he had to write it down. And stuff. Like now you literally just send somebody a link and go, hey, check out this band, check out that band.
Sure.
And so it is people at an older, you know, age in life start to experience music, and they do it through this podcast. That's why I talk about music a lot now. I love how the paths cross like that. And you're mentioning bands, and I can guarantee you listeners will go, they'll see if they can find that band.
Oh yeah.
And then they'll send a message and be like, hey, I checked that out. Completely love it. Or, you know, they may go, dude, I couldn't even hear a word they were saying or whatever they're.
Do you remember? I didn't know lyrics of what these guys were saying for so long. And I didn't know the names of the songs. Like I remember like Jawbreaker. I remember listening to Jawbreaker and being like, when I finally saw the album cover, being like, oh, that's not what I pictured in my head. Or that's what he's saying. That's crazy. I've been listening to it on a burned CD.
Yeah. When you mentioned Suicide Machines.
Yeah, man.
Two things, man. I was in the Army at the time at Fort Campbell, you know, whatever. That's about 40 minutes from Nashville or whatever. You just go to Nashville and see a lot of bands play. And, you know, things kind of ebb and flow. And at that time in the Army, you couldn't wear certain things like on post.
Like installations, right? Yeah.
Yeah, like, you know, you get snatched up by some first sergeant or command sergeant major, somebody, you know, who didn't even know who you were. You just be walking through the PX.
Right. He just don't like the look of you.
Yeah, I had on a Bad Brain shirt when I first got to Fort Campbell. And it's got a lightning bolt striking the Capitol, you know. And I had a first sergeant going into the PX, and he snatched me up and made me turn it inside out. I was like, okay. And
that'll do it.
I wasn't aware of that growing up. Like nobody other than like back then, what would kind of be called, you know, jocks or rednecks or whatever, like legit. We used to fight a lot and run. And so that was never really in my brain until then. It was like reality check. I was like, okay. But I had a Suicide Machines t-shirt, like when they first came out, their first record hit, and I ordered it, and it's just got like a white hand and a black hand, like shaking hands, and it just said Suicide Machines. And I remember going through the hospital chow line because the hospital had the best food. That's where you went and got the meal.
Right.
And the lady doing the stuff just kept telling me like how much she loved my shirt. She didn't fully. She's I don't know what Suicide Machines means, but I love the message of, you know, a black and white guy like shaking hands. And I was like, back in the 90s. Yeah, cool. Sure. Well, I went to a show in Nashville, Suicide Machines and Descendants. And man, I think like shades apart maybe, but after Suicide Machines played and in between sets, I was talking to the lead singer. You know how they'll come out to the merch table.
Of course.
And I mean, I think I don't know, man. By then I was maybe like an E4 or something. So we just get to talking about music. And so I tell him, you know, like, yeah, dude, like I'm in an infantry unit down at Fort Campbell. And it was like blowing his mind, like, but you're into punk? Like, yeah, man. Like,
yeah, it's like that dichotomy. You're like, how does that 1 + 1 don't equal 2 kind of thing? You know?
And you know, my thing like back then too was, you know, my experience, I always wanted to go in the Army, but my experience, like right before I enlisted, early entry was Somalia. That was all over the news.
Sure.
So for me, when I was going in at that time, there was not a whole lot, you know, for an infantry unit to be getting deployed and going anywhere. And then when Somalia was all over the news, that was my thing when I was talking to people and saying just like, hey, I want to go in the Army anyway, but how can you stomach what's going on? Like people are starving and the military's over there. And then to see soldiers being, you know, murdered and drugged through the streets, like I can't, I don't know. I couldn't stomach that. So when I would try to explain to people who were outside of that life and in, you know, a punk scene or whatever, that was my thing, was like, I don't know, man. Like I can't play an instrument. I'm not in a band, but I also don't want to sit on the sidelines. And so this is my thing. I'm going to do this, and we'll see what happens, you know. But it was one of those things, man, where going to shows and being in the military at the time were so polar opposites, like two completely different worlds, man.
What's so funny is like you couldn't have said it better. Like that is so much my experience at Ranger Battalion as well, and really the birth of what Brigands Co was. Like I said, in 2015 when I was there, and I feel like at the time in 2012 it was very. And I know people will remember this. I don't know that many, I say this all the time. I don't know that people like to admit it now, but back even in 2012 at Ranger Battalion, this whole like going to the range in your vans and looking and like the night vision while you're on your skateboard or whatever, like this cross paths that we are in now was not cool when I was in Ranger Battalion. It was not.
Right. Yeah.
And I know that for a fact. And sorry I'll preface this. I was called skater fag all the time.
Oh yeah.
In Ranger Battalion because I wore Vans and flip flops and I had a surfboard and a skateboard in my car. And that is the birth of what Brigands Co was. And it was because I'm not from here. Where are your Solomons on your days off? And why aren't you wearing your shooting your shooting competition hat on your days off, and whatever it was back then, you know, and it was very much like, oh, I don't know. I grew up like skating and surfing and playing music. I was also athletic and we were good wrestlers and very competitive. And that's where we found the bridge, me and my brother both. And a lot of it was from a mentor that I had from a high school job. We had a summer job that was working in a warehouse, unloading 18-wheelers and palletizing things and putting them on shelves with a forklift. No AC, no heat, just, you know, manual labor in high school for minimum wage. Our boss had a combat jump with 1st Ranger Battalion and did 17 years at 1st Ranger Battalion. And he was our manager back there and would basically shake his heads at us every day and be like, you guys are athletic. You think for yourselves. You're smart. You come from a good family. You see the news, like you see what's going on right now. You guys are not ready for college. You guys need to go serve your country. And if you do anything but Ranger Battalion, you're a fool. And this is why. And he used to write down, I mean, he was our real recruiter. I mean, looking back on it, he wrote down on a piece of packing paper, like, you're going to do this, you're going to go to MEPS, and then you're going to go to what is like the entry, you know, whatever, 30th AG, and then you're going to go to basic, and then this and that. And then there's this, and you're going to deploy and come back and be a team leader. All these different things. And that's exactly how the dominoes fell. And that is where he just filled our heads with, obviously, you know, the rumors are true. Ranger, 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 shoot, 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 kill, 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 that whole thing. And that went what we thought extremely well with the fast pace, energy, music, do your own thing. Like, I was very confused to be like, how does nobody listen to this music that I listen to here? All we do is like shoot guns and freaking kick doors in and blow stuff up and do all this. And I'm listening to like Operation Ivy, like knowledge in my headphones. And I'm like, this is where I want to be, man. This is it.
Yeah.
But again, it was still seen as not, you know, the norm, which is where Brigands Co started. And that whole thing, and any Rangers listening out there would definitely know the General Creighton Abrams Charter, and something to the effect of one of the lines in there is talking about early Ranger Battalion, saying it will, anywhere this battalion goes, it will be apparent that it is the best. It shall be comprised of no hoodlums or brigands, or it will be disbanded. So we want the best of the best. We want your standard exceeders. We want your, you know, tip of the spear individuals. But as you can imagine, the folks back then that were the best mountaineers and the savviest people may not have been the most legal acting people as well.
Yeah.
So, hey, we want the smart, the best of the best, but any hoodlums or brigands here, meaning, the game's over. So we started looking around, making almost the joke of like, dude, everyone here is a brigand, man. Like, we all made it through the ranks. Look at me. Like, I go surf and skate, and I'm kind of against the grain. Like, I don't really belong here by the look of it. Everybody drinks and fights on the weekends, and it's a rambunctious, my fraternity will kill your fraternity kind of mentality that never stops. And that fueled, at the time, once we picked up the drumsticks and the guitar again in Ranger Battalion, fresh off a deployment, you catch a show and the mosh pits get pretty crazy. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So now how many years did you do?
We both just did our contract. We did our 4 years. Again, a couple deployments, classic Ranger stuff, man. Like I said, the rumors are true. The crazy tab spec 4 when you get there, and all the push-ups you can imagine, and the bear crawls, and it very much honed in a mentality that had been seeded in our childhood. I think with, again, the strict household, it was a free household, but set to a high standard. And I would say that is maybe not as much of the free part, but the standard part was definitely paramount in Ranger Regiment. Regiment was very much the bridge between your conventional Army and your special operations. There are components that, it is under special operations, and there are tier 1 components, but you will still have your haircut a certain way. You will still be clean shaved. Yeah, your PTs look a little bit cooler. Maybe they look a little different, but they're still going to be within standard, and AR-670-1 and all this different stuff. So it was freedom. It was special operations, but it wasn't, you're growing beards and showing up in civilian clothes all the time. So it was, at the time, it was a very much a high speed learning environment for sure.
Now, do you still see it as being very similar still? Like when you're encountering people who are maybe still active now or just now getting in?
I don't know for sure. I would have to ask somebody, but I have a theory that Ranger Battalion's probably worse right now than it was when I was in, training wise, because I know how Ranger is, and we would come back from a deployment, take our 18 days of leave, or, post deployment leave, block leave, come back home, and they're like, hey, we're going to Fort Campbell, Kentucky to walk in the mountains for 3 weeks. So say bye to the families again. We've got a training trip now, and that's your op tempo. And then you come back, and then 4 of your privates go to Ranger school, and that's not fun for them. And then, they come back from that, and, we're actually going to go do this mountaineering, whatever. We're going back to Blue Ridge Mountains in Dahlonega for a bit. So we're going to go travel up there. It is a high op tempo. And that was with us deploying every year while the GWAT was still going on. So I would imagine now it is a very nonstop, high level of training, as Ranger Battalion always does. But I also know that must mean that they are pumping out some absolute freaks of Rangers over there. So I know that there are guys that are in right now that seem to be holding the standard and carrying the torch no different. And obviously it's no stranger to what's going on politically in the world now. They're not counting on being stagnant for very long, I guarantee you. And I'm sure there's a handful of them that are right there ready to get after it, if not already getting to it. So
yeah, I think too that when knowledge is passed on, and esprit de corps or unit pride, when you can build a culture in anything, either the military or a business or in the first responder world, like if you explain to people there is a history and now you're part of that, and it's your duty to carry that on and to make sure that if someone knows you are part of this, group or unit, that it means something and that you reflect positively on it. I mean, that was my thing when I was in. The few things that really fell flat for me was that my leaders were incredible and motivating, and most of them, you know, we were in an infantry unit. They got tabbed, went to Ranger School, came back, and so they would try to pass on that knowledge and motivate us to go to Ranger School and re-enlist and stuff. But at the time, the Army had put a freeze on promotions. So when I was in basic training, I was rewarded, and they had a fast track program. And they're like, hey, you're going to graduate, you know, E2, you're going to have your mosquito wings. This will set you up when you get to your unit. If you keep doing what you're doing in the military, you should make E4 at whatever at that time would have been like record time at like 18 months, I think was the earliest maybe. Okay. They're like, that way that'll set you up in your division to get a slot to go to Ranger School. So I was like, all right, cool, everything's set. And then I get to my unit, and they're like, no.
What are you talking about, man?
Yeah, they're like, no, there's a promotional freeze going on.
Yeah, very cool.
They're like, you can try as hard as you want to, but you're not going to make PFC or E3 until 18 months, and you won't make E4 until 26 months.
Yeah, they're doing it by the book right now.
Yeah, and I just remember, and I had a really good platoon sergeant, you know, and this cat went through Ranger School at like, I don't know, like 32 years old or something crazy. Like he was at E7.
Yeah.
And he said he always wanted to go, but then he was like, how can I tell soldiers to go if I haven't gone? And I look back now, and at that time, 32 was like, dude, this dude's old, he's ancient, but he's got all the wisdom, you know? And so anyway, but he went, and then he just come back from Ranger School when I got to the platoon. But that kind of set me up to look at it and go, and he said, hey, you need to remember, you know, how's he said, like something to the effect of, we defend democracy, but we don't practice it or something. You know, he's like, you're going to work as hard as you can right now, but you can't get these promotions. You can't get these school slots ahead of time. You can't do it in a division. That set my mind like, okay, I love the Army. I love what we're doing, but I don't want to be limited. Don't tell me to work really hard and try really hard, but then I can't get the reward to kind of like, okay, I'm giving you 110%, but let me get what I want.
Yeah, very different time.
Yeah, and it was interesting because now I'll talk to people, and you know, people want to bash the Army, the military, and I get when institutions begin to shift. I think to me, that was the two big disservices at the time were that was the promotional freeze. And then because we had been in such a era of peace for, you know, conventional military,
right?
Our, you know, my leaders, most of them had not been in deployed except for Desert Storm. And then I had a team leader who had jumped in Panama. But for the most part, like there was not that knowledge that after 9/11, so many infantry units got deployed, and then that knowledge got passed on, and so these units, you know, were creating incredible soldiers that were really, really capable of doing these astronomical feats. And I look at things and say, if everything can transition and change, but it changes in a positive way, and it always looks at how does this reward our entry-level people, and how does it reward, you know, our mid-level supervisors, right, then they're good to go. Like if the higher-ups always put that into perspective, I think they'll be good to go. I think, like, you know, Ranger Regiment stuff has always tapped into that no matter what. I think it was really good at that, and my brigade was really good at that. You know, just in general, like, hey, this is the deal, you know, even though this is the standard, we're going to exceed it. And if you don't exceed this standard,
and that's so much of, you know, where you talk about like that young environment and maybe the inexperienced environment going into, you know, because of due to all the peacetime, and, you know, that pendulum is swinging back, and that's where we're at now, right? Like even since I've been out, and, you know, I got out in 2017, and now it was slowing down then. The ROE was changing even for Ranger and, everybody involved. So now it's slowed down even more since 2021, obviously, all of that. And now we're at that very young, how experienced are your team leaders right now?
Mm-hmm.
Again, I think that's reality. You can't do anything about that. I do always will try and refrain from talking down on that because it doesn't do anything. It's reality. We see it at the fire department. I'm seeing it at my department right now. It's the way of the world. It's the pendulum. Hey, in 10 years from now, we'll be talking about how old we all are, right? So right now, it is what it is. How being more solution minded is, okay, how do we combat that and how do we patch those holes? And it's training, and it's nonstop training, and it's doing what Ranger does best, which is having an op tempo. They are a wind up freaking car that you set them down anywhere and they are going to go full steam ahead. So again, there could be something that pops off tomorrow, and whatever Ranger platoon they send out there, I guarantee would meet them energetically with no issues. So, and again, we say the same thing. I was talking about this recently at our fire department is, hey, look at all these young people. You look at some of these crews and you stop and think, wow, that's a ride up. That's a ride up driver. That's a ride up lieutenant. And the firefighter is actually on probation. He's within his first year. Man, if you get a 2-bell alarm on the beach side and you're rolling up first, let's hope everybody does well, and not to say we don't have faith in our employees, but how are we making up for that lack of experience that we can't control by training and op tempo in garrison? That's the biggest and best thing you can do is let's do it for real. Let's do it for real because as you know, more than anybody or just as much is you never rise to the occasion, you fall back on your training. So if there's no training or minimal training, you're going to fall back on minimal skills, and best of luck to you, brother.
Yeah.
That's how I see it.
And in your field, you just mentioned, the fire department, in your field, there are standards and then you exceed those standards. And if you've got a younger or a newer department, I won't even say younger because we've got people 30s and 40s that are getting, into the first responder world, which is incredible. I know a guy that went through, I guess it would have been his third police academy at like 61 or 62 years old.
Wow.
Still works out. Absolutely incredible.
Still of service and value. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, the guy had been NYPD for 20 plus years, did intel work, did private intel work, overseas. He wrote a book from Brooklyn to Baghdad. Christopher Strom's great guy, but yeah, he was already retired and then did the private world for a while and then went and joined another police department and went through their academy. So he has all that knowledge, even though he is a entry level officer. He can actually share his experiences. Now, do y'all have, and I'm kind of putting you on the spot, but do y'all have people that come back who have maybe retired and have been through some of your larger fire incidents is in your area? Do they come back and teach or pass on that knowledge, especially if you've got a younger section coming up?
So yeah, yes, and all of the above in different ways. I would say we have a huge thing that we do as far as hammering down on training, and you can't just go out and get experience, right? Like it's just something you can't control. So the biggest thing that we all talk about what you can do is go outside of your department, because your department's going to have their regular training schedule or whatever's on the calendar to keep up continuing education hours and stuff like that. They're going to do the minimum. If you zoom out and go outside of your fire department, there are conferences and there are extra classes and all of these tech classes, and you can go and expand your knowledge so much further just by going to these courses that, in many cases, like my department, they will sponsor you and reimburse you for going to these courses. So things that I have found great value in and relearned so many lessons that I've maybe forgotten since my time in the Army. You know, things like earlier this year, me and some friends of mine went through a course called One Bad Tour down in Coral Springs, Florida. And it's just a 24-hour nonstop firemanship course. So it will test you as far as your hydration, your nutrition, how, you know, the lack of sleep, the skills that you're going to have to demonstrate at 2, 3, 4 in the morning. And the smoker starts out with a heavy kick you in between the legs PT session and into some pretty hot rooms right off the bat. And it gets you wide eyed and holy crap, what just started? And we're only 3 hours in and I've got, you know, a lot of time left. I've got 21 hours left, you know. So things like that, being able to push your own limit is very possible in the fire service. You know, the courses exist. Look at us, the podcasts are out there, the YouTube videos, the instructionals, that is all bonus to you getting your butt in your gear and going outside and doing whatever. You know, that's the biggest thing is I see time and time again in our trainings, in our regular department trainings and at conferences, what makes or breaks people, and I'm sure you could attest to this on the police side, is who here wears their gear like a second skin, and who can move and who can operate and close their eyes and function all of their gear properly. Because I'm betting on that guy. I don't care if he's a little slow. I don't care if he's a little weak. I'm betting on that guy. Because look at me. I'm a little short. I'm a little weak. I'm a little slow. I don't think I'm the best at anything. I call myself a lazy firefighter because I'm always trying to conserve energy as much as I can because I'm looking for the long haul. I want to go bottle after bottle, you know. So I'm looking to save energy as soon as I hop off the truck and be minimalist, not knowing how long I'm going to be operating. But it's always who is the most efficient and proficient with their gear, I would say. And that comes from time in it. So whether that's going to new conferences and finding areas and instructors that can put you in situations that you haven't quite thought of. Also a huge thing in the fire service that people look over is it's so hard to just find new buildings that you don't know. If you have a training tower, eventually you've searched that training tower with a blindfold on so many times. I kind of know it a little bit. I know, I'm over here by this storage cage or whatever. So going to these other conferences and traveling a little bit can get you into a brand new burn building with new instructors that travel. And again, we can't control how young we are. We can't control how many trauma alerts and mass casualties and structure fires we have, but we can train heavily on all of them. And as much of a cliche as that is, I think the best thing, the way we try and stay the most consistent, is obviously by making it fun and enjoyable and by being practical. Like we're talking about getting better at putting our mask on with gloves. Well, I'm not just going to go outside and just do it 1,000 times until I'm good at it. I'm going to throw that as an exercise into a workout, and we're going to get better at it that way. So I'm going to get my workout in like we do every shift. I'm going to be in gear during that workout, which is only going to make me more comfortable. And then I'm going to throw in, you know, if we do a deck of cards, well, every time I pull a king, I'm going to do 5 gloved mask ups. Or whatever, you know. So just looking for little things like that and making camaraderie like the special sauce that you sprinkle on top of everything, dude, you're rocking and rolling.
When I was on patrol and would run and work out, one of the things that I had learned in the academy, I had a great instructor, and he was like, you all have got to get your brains wired to be able to call foot pursuits. Like as soon as you start chasing, because it's on, you know, it's you and that person. And usually if they're running from you, almost 9 times out of 10, they already know what they got on them. Obviously a gun, drugs, or they know they got warrants, or they think that, you know, they're a suspect. But when they run, they know the terrain. you don't until you learn it, you know. And he was
Right.
always preaching about knowing the cuts and the areas, you know. But his thing was like calling foot pursuits in your head. He's like, you can call them out loud too, but picture a person, picture their clothing, the descriptions, call out the streets, you know, your locations. And it just kind of set that mindset of when I'm on patrol, I'm not out here looking for speeders. Like where I worked, it was like, who's got a gun on them? Who's in a gang? Who's causing problems? If I roll by and there's 5 guys posted up at a store and the one guy grabs his waistband and turns his body away from me, I'm going to key in on that guy, you know, and until I can articulate an investigative stop. But then once you get into that foot pursuit, there were officers who could run really fast, but they didn't think about, hey, I got to also be able to call it out on the radio, coordinate units, know what the next 2 and 3 and 4 streets are to set up a perimeter while still trying to keep the person in eyesight. And so all those things that became very much second nature to us. And then we passed them on through field training to newer officers. When I made sergeant and came back to my same district, and this was after I worked homicides, FBI task force, drug units, all that stuff, I came back as a sergeant to the same area I patrolled as a beat officer.
Wow.
And worked all these assignments and gotten a foot pursuit where one of my officers was chasing a guy. And I show up where, you know, he tackles the guy or whatever, he gets him on the ground. And I show up and he's like, Sarge, where'd you come from? I was like, you got to know the cuts, brother. You got like, yeah, I'm a sergeant, but I
ran half the distance you did.
yeah. Because I knew the cut, and all I did was pop a little bitty fence. You know, it was like, man, you got to learn the cuts. And I had realized too, hey, these officers have not experienced what I did on like special assignments on the patrol level. And what had happened at that time was a lot of the units or the officers had gotten away from proactive stuff. It's like where I was always kind of on the lookout for stuff.
Right.
They were more all being trained or being conditioned to be reactive. And so I was like, yeah, you can't do that. And I took one officer and I was explaining to her, this is your beat or your area. It's your area of responsibility. Like you've got to know everything. And at that time she was getting a lot of like stolen cars and a lot of just calls for gunshots and stuff like that. And I was like, eventually what's going to happen, you're going to come out here and you're going to start chasing someone and they're going to disappear in that wood line. But what I need you to do is walk with me. We're going to go through this wood line. You're going to see just past the edge of the woods. When you get in there, there's a trail that wraps all the way back around to this dead end cul-de-sac over here. And all they're going to do is hit that. They're going to come all the way around, catch this street, catch that next right on the street, and they're going to walk right back up to the apartment.
They're going to get that area of least resistance, and it's going to be like a foot trail coming right back, baby.
I was like, they always come back to home base. Like human beings have to be where they feel comfortable. And we went out, we walked that area. I said, lock it in your mind. Now, imagine these streets are, you know, I don't know, man, 6 months later or whatever, however long it was, she responds to domestic violence call, and a teenager right off the bat punches a woman right in front of her and then takes off running. And so she starts chasing him. And of course she starts calling it out. And myself and a couple others knew the area enough, but man, we got there, got the kid stopped and stuff. It's like, and she was excited. Like, oh, yeah, he did just exactly what you said. I said, like, police work is not hard. If it was hard, I wouldn't be able to do it. It's knowing,
I could imagine so much of like that. That is what makes a real difference when you're, you know, between an officer that can do the job and an officer that exceeds the job, right? Is who can operate with these different tabs in their head. That's kind of how I see it all the time. And sometimes I open way too many tabs and some of them stop responding or close out all on their own, right? But who can keep all the tabs of, oh, hey, we're going right now, right in your face, 0 to 100 now. Oh crap, I gotta let someone know, I gotta call it out. No different than taking contact, giving your 3Ds, you know, your distance, direction, description, all that good stuff. Boom, I gotta let someone know, I gotta get people here, start calling this stuff out. And then simultaneously I'm looking at where we're at and is anybody else behind me involved, anyone else scattered, you know. I could imagine that there is a lot of people, but just like you said, how I reciprocate that on the fire side is that battleship turns by making these small minor adjustments in your day-to-day operations in the job. And I say it by, does it really make that much of a difference if if I go up to a burning building and I need to get into the front door with the hose line? Does it make that much of a difference if I need to mask up going down on a ground, like on my knees, and I step my stuff down and I start putting my mask and helmet and gloves and I pick up my tool? Is that different than being able to do it all standing up and I can just do it like this? Because now I'm up and I'm aware and I can look a little bit more. And my Halligan, I'm standing on the adz end of my Halligan, so the fork is sticking up in the air, so I don't even have to bend down and grab it anymore. I think now, if you want to argue if we time it and that one little detail, is that going to make me a good or a bad firefighter? Absolutely not. But that mixed with 10 more examples as to little minute changes and things that you do differently with your gear and your equipment, that's where you start to see those big swinging of the battleship changes in performance. And, like I said, all of those tabs in your brain add up to big changes for sure.
Yeah. And knowing why did the firefighters before you maybe do that? Like, what was their logic or why did this happen? And a perfect example is like firearms training in a police department. When I first started, we were being trained, hey, engage the target, but bring your weapon down to the center of your stomach, reload, and get back up on target. Now, no one, and it always felt very strange to me because I was like, I get what you're saying, but my eyes are now coming down here. I want my eyes to stay up.
Your sight picture is completely
everything.
Gone.
Yeah. I was like, man, this seems. Yeah, I was like, this seems so counter, but I was a brand new, recruit. So I just stayed quiet and I kept hearing this over and over. And that's how they were training us. And I was like, man, I can't stand this. I'm going to do it just enough to qualify and get through the academy. But man, I cannot do this. Then later I found out, because I'm a nerd, man. I'm like, it bothered me so much. All of that started, the way I understood it, was back when they had revolvers. And so what they would do is bring the revolver down, extract the empty shell casings, and then put the like butt of the weapon into their stomach to stabilize it. Cause now they got to put a speed loader into these like 6 holes, turn the speed loader, come back up. And so that was their logic, was like, we got to stabilize this weapon to actually get, and I'm like, yeah, I get that. But when all I'm doing is putting a magazine in a weapon,
you don't need that working position down so close, like you're
no.
Yeah,
and so then it was
muzzle loading this thing.
Yeah, I was like, man, nobody questioned it when they transitioned over. Everybody just kept teaching what they knew. Like, nope, this is it. And then I was able to see years down the road, really cool people. They created in our department a reality-based training unit. And so all they did, they ordered a bunch of simunitions weapons.
That's awesome. That's
a bunch of ammo. Cool. And then they started filming all these scenarios, and they would use at that time we had 3 full-time SWAT teams. So they would use the shoot house that was built and eventually learn, just like you said, the layout of the house, you start to predict it. You try not to. So then since we're using simunitions, they started building these like plywood walls that they could set up on the flat range and create whatever kind of obstacles they wanted to.
Oh yeah.
And it was cool to watch them take a real scenario, and then we had to execute. And one of the times, I think I was on a homicide unit at the time, and one of the things we had to do was like move through an entire wood line with our gas mask on, moving from cover to cover to cover to cover. Right. And then get to the actual shoot house, then get in the shoot house, smoke's going, and then engage targets with simunitions.
Yeah, real top to bottom, full mission profile.
And I'm telling you, when we did that, now obviously there are some people out there that love wearing a gas mask or pro mask or whatever. Like, I've always hated it, But doing that, I was like, man, like, it's been so long that we've pushed, or that we have not pushed, moving to cover. We always did that. Always did it on patrol. Always told the recruits like, hey, you get out of that car, a shot's being fired. Are you getting behind this car? Do you have anything else to get behind? Is there a tree before you get to that house?
Right.
Think about that's your next line of cover, you know? So anyway, when we were doing this bounding through this wooded area, and a buddy of mine was, I mean, smoked out of gas, you know, and he got so mad and he was like, this is absolutely stupid. This is some of those dumb, wild scenarios where we're supposed to fail. And, you know, this is never going to happen in the real world. And I was like, hold up, buddy. It's already happened in the real world. It happened in the movie theater, and CS gas was administered, and the shooter started shooting people indiscriminately. And as officers responded, guess what? They had to deploy their mask, and maybe they've never ran more than 2 feet with that thing, or maybe all they've ever done is gone in
their initial training. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, yeah. And I was like, just look at it as a learning experience. Now know that this has already happened. So they didn't even create the scenario. They're just putting us through what these officers already went through. Right. But man, one of the cool things they started doing was filming all these scenarios and learning, you know. And so in the department, it was like, you could learn, okay, this is why I tell you, not me, but the instructor, like, this is why I tell you, never have anything in your dominant hand. No pencils, no paper, none of that when you're engaging someone in the public. Because when you go to draw your weapon, now you either have to let go of that,
right?
It's going to be,
it's going to throw off your normal, whatever your normal is. It's going to throw it off because it's one more factor.
And man, I did a scenario just like that, and I had the guy handed me some paperwork, and as soon as he handed it, he drew a weapon, and I engage, and I do a magazine change holding like whatever his driver's license and a registration. Do a mag change, still holding that, which is clean. But they were like, "See what I mean? Now, what happens if the ID gets in the breech of the weapon? Whatever." I was like, "Okay." It was amazing. So I say all that to say, if departments, whether fire, you know, EMS, police departments, if they're learning from the generations before them, but then also saying, well, why did we do it that way? Why did we take a knee putting on our equipment? Can we do it standing up? And if we can, what does that allow us to do? To see the building better, to operate better, and to even just, I mean, psychologically, you're on your feet. It's like in football, you keep your feet moving, right?
I say stuff like, hey, I'm lazy. That's one less squat I got to do with all my equipment. I don't know. It's my opinion on things, you know.
Yeah.
And again, it's like, one change probably isn't going to make or break you. But if you can always be just that constant mentality to how can I make this 5% better? I don't got to make it 80% better because it might not be possible to be. You got to put a mask on a certain way. It is what it is. But maybe I could make it a few notches better and shave a couple more seconds off. And, you know, that's what we're really looking to do. You can do that on a day in, day out basis with just your own crew training and stuff like that. And for us young departments, that is absolutely, you know, important right now.
Good deal, man. Well, look, dude, and we talked about music early on, which is great. Is there anything that you're kind of listening to now or that you have listened to in the past that you're like, yeah, if somebody wants to hear something good, check this out, or like a music recommendation or anything like that you'd want someone to check out?
Yeah, honestly, I have these like huge, I have like massive mood swings with like my music, right? If I'm doing one thing, I'm listening to this. If I'm just filling Brigands Co orders in the shop, then, you know, I've got some random thing, you know, whatever playlist on, whatever. But dude, anytime when I do a lot of my cardio, like I'll go off on a run or even a ruck still or something like that, I still listen to the classics, man. It's nothing but my Operation Ivy, the Circle Jerks and Descendants, and, you know, all the good stuff. So nothing changes there for me. I think it's just, I don't know what it is. It's still just nostalgic for me to listen to, I feel like, and I'll never get tired of it. But then, dude, I've just gotten in. I have hook, line, and sinker into the whole hardcore scene, man. Like Kubla Khan is probably my favorite. You know, I listen to, shout out Matt Honeycutt. He tatted me up last year, and I've been a fan ever since. But dude, anything Kubla Khan puts out, those guys are freaking killer, man. And Really simple though. I like all the still the same stuff I was listening to in regiment. I'm still just like put them on repeat. Parkway Drive and a lot of the a lot of stuff like that. But yeah, other than that, I still listen to my Texas country every now and then, and I gotta pay homage to my roots, of course. But other than that, man, a lot of heavy hardcore. That's really what I've been into lately.
Good. Hey, how can everybody check out your merchandise company, and how can they reach out to you?
Yeah, so through Brigands Co, we are most active on Instagram. We are at Brigands_Co. Check us out on there. I'm always on there answering DMs. If you want to link up, connect, got any questions, feel free to shoot us a message on there. You can tap the link in our bio to pull up our link tree. Once this drops, I'll put the link up there. And some of our other podcasts and philanthropy type projects we've done. Me personally, I'm on Instagram at Pecos Dill. You can find me through the Brigands Co page on there. Again, I'm really just a reflection of Brigands Co and act as an ambassador on there. So if you got any personal questions, want to hop on the phone, anything you guys need, feel free to shoot me a DM on there too. But holler at me. Yeah, the website has been open intermittently, and feel free to hop on and catch some gear.
Good deal. Well, I have to remind everybody out there, I haven't done it for a long time, but do all that like stuff. Give me some 5-star reviews, thumbs up, all that stuff, like self-promotion.
Show the love, baby.
Like y'all do your part and click those likes. Reach out to me on the Disruptors with Brian Sanders. It's a website. I've got my training up there for gang courses, investigative courses. I do it for citizens. I do it for sworn law enforcement. I teach in person. I also teach virtual. I can do virtual sessions. If people are getting into the gang world and they're trying to work informants, I can do virtual sessions and bring an actual informant in with us in a private session. And you can be anywhere in the U.S. or anywhere else. Send you the link. And we lock on, and he and I will just kind of explain to you how to work informants, how to develop them, how to work gang stuff. But reach out to me there. And I'm on Instagram, _disruptors_podcast. And if you're not into all of that, reach out to me on Gmail with the disruptors.bc.ski. That's SKI at Gmail. And man, Dylan, I appreciate your time, dude. We'll post this up and y'all check him out. Other than that, man, it'll be Disruptors out.
Thanks.